A moment here while I share my screen.
Let me put you on so you can share your screen.
Let's see, should that, oh, I think I need to be enabled.
Try now.
There we go. All right. Perfect. How's that? Is everyone able to see the screen here?
Yes.
Perfect. So thanks for having me. So this morning I was looking to cover 3 topics, as Jim mentioned, and kind of go down sequentially because we've kind of got a different hierarchy of kind of how these pieces work. You're probably somewhat familiar with this. We have our general plan update, which the city is in the process of updating. This is the city's 20-year plan that includes development, growth, policy decisions, and kind of the blueprint for where the city is going to go. Then we have our housing element update, which is running concurrently, but as you're probably aware, it's on a separate track because of state requirements. And it basically is the city's housing plan over the next 8 years. And then I'll provide an overview of some of the more prominent developments that you might already be seeing under construction downtown or that are in the works in the near future. And then we can transition into discussion. Happy to talk through kind of any questions or thoughts that you have on any range of issues here in San Mateo. So first, starting with our general plan, this is basically our guiding document. It informs our specific plans, our zoning code, and helps inform and justify policy decisions made by our city council and other governing bodies. And it also provides the city with a legally defensible framework for the choices that we make. So the general plan update process, it's been in the works for several years now. It started in mid-2018. And then kind of got off the ground in 19 and 20. The pandemic kind of interrupted that process. The city really picked it up again in 2021. And then I joined the general plan update team when I joined the city in June of 2021. And we're making our way forward at a good clip at this point. But the general plan starts with a vision statement. And so this vision statement was developed at the front end of the process with a lot of community engagement and input from our decision makers and ultimately the city council. And so this is the vision statement that will guide the city here in our next general plan cycle. And it really focuses on the idea that the city is a vibrant, livable, diverse, and healthy community that respects the quality of its neighborhoods, fosters a flourishing economy, is committed to equity, and is a leader in environmental sustainability. And then we've got our 5 values that support that statement. In terms of timeline, as I noted, right now we're wrapping up our goals, policies, and actions phase, which basically we've got a total of 7 general plan elements, one of which is the housing element. And so we've been developing the goals, the policies, and the implementation actions that go into each of these elements, separate from the housing element because it's on its own track. So we held our first meeting before the city council in October. We're looking to hold our second in November. And then that will really, once we get guidance there, that will transition us into preparation of the full draft general plan, which will run through 2023 with a goal of having a document that's ready for council adoption by the end of 2023. And so this will include additional input from our general plan subcommittee, planning commission, city council, and we do try to have a very robust and extensive community outreach to continue to get input from all of our stakeholders around the city. So the general plan is made up of 8 core elements. There's other pieces to the general plan, which I'll touch on in a moment, but the meat of the general plan is really in these 8 elements, starting with land use, circulation, housing, which is on its separate track, but will ultimately be part of our general plan, community design and historic resources, conservation, open space, parks and recreation, public services and facilities, safety, and noise. And then in addition, the general plan, its first chapter is its introduction. This kind of sets the context. We've also got our various appendices, acknowledgements, glossary, and the other pieces that really kind of make the plan complete. In terms of our milestones, as I noted, we're wrapping up our goals, policies, and action phase, and then moving into preparing the draft general plan. Concurrently with that, we are in the early stages of preparing the environmental impact report for this new plan. And there'll be a lot that goes into this because this general plan at this point has a draft land use map that is planning for some significant growth in the city over the next 20 years. So kind of getting a little bit more specific into the goals, policies, and actions, what is it that makes up the general plan? The goal is that overarching desired outcome or result. It's more of a framework, kind of a guiding principle that helps when we're developing policies and plans and making sure we're covering the areas we need to. A policy is a bit more binding, and it regulates specific activities, guides decision-making, and directs our ongoing efforts when we're working to achieve a goal. And usually you have a goal and any number of policies underneath it. And then along with that, we also have our actions, which are specific measures, procedures, or techniques that can help achieve a specified goal or implement a policy. Action's always going to be tied to a goal and or a policy, but a policy doesn't necessarily need an action. Sometimes a policy can be a standalone that exists within a general plan element. Just as I noted, we did select our preferred land use scenario, which was kind of aligned with alternative C, but the step before our goals, policies, and actions was to consider different growth alternatives. And so our growth is focused in 10 study areas. I'll show a visual of that in just a moment. And then over those, there were different options for land use intensities, low, medium, and high density. And then that would result in the different level of growth we would be planning for in this next 20-year cycle. So we held this public hearing back in April and then confirmed it in July. And ultimately, we have kind of a blended alternative B and C that were selected by the city council. And so that's the preferred land use scenario that's going to go into the general plan land use element. And that'll also be the basis for our environmental impact report evaluation. So this is a map of our 10 study areas. Right here, you can see the focus really in this general plan was to maintain existing levels of density and intensity in most of the city, with focused growth around key transit areas, transit corridors, and areas that could handle that additional growth. So the idea was concentration, which would then support a shift out of cars and into other supporting other modes of transit. So you can see the El Camino Real corridor was a primary corridor that we planned around, as well as our 3 station areas in Hillsdale, Hayward Park, and then the downtown station. And then we also identified some areas along 101 and then the Bridgepoint Shopping Center area, because that also aligned with some of our housing element goals and where growth could occur. So really the focus was placing this in areas that have higher degrees of access and then maintaining existing growth levels through many of our neighborhoods and the rest of the city. So just to give you an idea of the different levels of intensity that are imagined, and there's still going to be a discussion about the final range of heights and densities that go into our general plan. But here, this kind of, you've got your single family areas. These are the areas outside of our study areas. Our lower growth areas for these are usually 1 to 3 stories up to about 40 units an acre. And these kind of characterize your transitional area from your neighborhoods to your higher density areas. Then we have our medium, which is around 4 to 7 stories with up to 100 units an acre. And then our high density, which is 100 to 200 units an acre and could have buildings that are over 8 stories. And these area land uses are focused around really our El Camino Real corridor and our 3 Caltrain stations. And so these are some visuals of residential buildings at these various levels of intensity. Accordingly, we also have a lot of mixed use land use designations, which can allow for flexibility where we could get commercial retail on the ground floor, maybe some office, but then also pair that with residential uses, because obviously one of the challenges right now is we have a housing shortage in the city, and particularly an affordability crisis. And so how you can address that is by getting more units online and ensuring that all of our residents or all of those people that work here have an opportunity to live here. And so the goal with our mixed use is to really promote areas where you have both housing and other uses as well. And that can also support the idea that you don't need to drive as much to get to your needed amenities in your job. We also have our commercial designations, and these are characterized really kind of in our commercial regional areas like a Bridgepoint, a Hillsdale Mall, our commercial service areas. These are more of like an auto repair, other light industrial, but not quite. You think of those as on Palm Avenue along and uses around our 101 and 92 corridor, as well as areas of the El Camino Real corridor. And then you have our commercial neighborhood. You could think of 25th Avenue, the Bel Mateo area, and then kind of the periphery of our downtown area. And then we have a number of office parks around the city. And so these align with where we would imagine these type of uses. Oftentimes where we might see office use is we might allow for medium or high along, say, like the 101 corridor that can then provide a buffer to housing, maybe on the site, but as far away from the highway as possible to reduce exposure to air quality. And then just kind of our industrial classifications, we have a handful of areas around the city that can accommodate R&D and light industrial. And then our range of open space. One of the focuses of this general plan, because the traditional approach to acquiring land and then developing parks is significantly expensive given the cost of land in the city. So one of the ways that we are exploring provision of additional parks and open spaces through the provision of privately owned public open space. You can think of some of the park spaces at Bay Meadows, and then other projects are providing these, so we can still add additional parks and open space to the city as we grow, reducing the overhead cost to the city to both acquire the land and then ultimately maintain. And then along with this, we are looking at how we can better utilize and maximize our existing parks to serve our population and their needs. And so that's kind of a broad overview of the general plan update. Happy to go into that in more detail if any of you have questions. Did want to provide a housing element update. My apologies, I had a couple slides and somehow when I opened it up, they had gotten swallowed up in my computer. So I'll just talk through them, but I can pull up some additional tables if you're interested. Our housing element is driven by state law in many respects, both in terms of timeline and the number of housing units we have to plan for. And so we are just wrapping up what's termed the fifth housing cycle, which ran from 2015 to 2022. And we're now finalizing the plan for our next 8-year housing cycle, which will take us through 2031. And per the state's regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, as you may have heard it, the city is required to plan for at least 7,015 new housing units. And within those 7,000 plus units, we are required to plan for a certain number of market rate or above moderate, as well as 3 different levels of low income housing or of affordable housing at moderate, low, and very low income levels. And those make up a percentage that is about 2/3 of our housing allocation does need to be addressed within those lower income categories. And that is the significant challenge for the city, and every city around the state, is the resources and how you plan to accommodate that many affordable units. So the city did prepare a draft housing element. We started over 2 years ago. We had significant outreach last fall and into the winter. And then we held public hearings and ultimately published our draft housing element this past April. You can see the cover here. And then based on public input and our decision making, our council member input, we updated that document and submitted to the state for State Department of Housing and Community Development in the beginning of July. We did receive our comment letter at the end of September. It did identify a variety of areas where they're looking for more information, more detail, additional background information to support our findings. But basically what we found and how the housing element is being structured is that within the city's existing zoning, we identified the capacity for up to 10,000 new housing units. So the overarching approach of our housing element for this cycle is that we provide and adopt policies and other act programs that will really help facilitate growth within our zoning, but we don't need to do any rezoning in order to meet our housing element requirements. I know there's been a variety of individuals who have questioned that, have raised concerns that that won't sufficiently address it, but we do feel comfortable that with the implementation of those policies and programs to support that our existing zoning could accommodate enough housing to meet the city's regional housing needs allocation. And then we realized that identified with that is 2.5 years later, we'll have an updated general plan that will actually increase capacity even more, because our general plan is planning for up to 20,000 new housing units over the next 20 years. And so we feel that between our housing element, maximizing our existing zoning, and then the general plan improved land or changed land uses, that will give the city a very good opportunity to have a clear path to meeting the state's housing requirements. So also happy to touch on this further if you have any further questions about our housing element, the process, or what's going into getting our housing element certified after my presentation. So then I also wanted to spend a few minutes kind of walking through the downtown projects in particular, because that's where a lot of our growth and new development is happening. We do have a variety of projects around the city, but really where you'll see the most activity outside of our single family neighborhoods is in the downtown area. So most notably, and I mean, this was a great effort. It took over 8 years to get done. We have our Kiku Crossing 100% affordable project, which will, when completed, bring 225 new affordable housing units at low and very low income levels to the city, right in close proximity to the downtown Caltrain station. And then paired with that, because this is being built on city land that is an existing surface parking lot, we are building a new parking garage with 526 parking stalls, and that are actually 526 public plus 164 to serve the Kiku Crossing all affordable project. If you drive by that area, you'll see significant progress on the parking garage, and you'll see the Kiku Crossing residential building making its way out of the ground. And so that's really exciting. And we are looking this spring to have the parking garage completed, and a year from this spring having the housing project completed. So that has been a significant planning effort, and I think it's a great project for the city.
What's the affordable cost on it, the monthly cost?
I don't know the specific affordable cost, but basically the goal is that those units will be affordable to people in the low income category. And so that's people that make up to 80% of the area median income. And then for very low, that's 50% of the area median income. And so and that does have different levels depending on whether you're an individual or a family. And the goal is that we're able to serve both in this project. So moving down B Street, you probably see this project. It's even well further along from even this photo in the presentation here. We've got a rendering of what this building will look like when it's done. The old Trags site, right adjacent to our downtown Caltrain station. This is a 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 20,000 square feet of commercial retail. It has an office component and then 64 residential units. And so this is kind of a super mixed use in that it's got 3 different use categories within the building. And so this one, we're looking at completion here. This is a private development, but the developer has estimated that this summer will be when this project is completed. We have 406 East 3rd. This is a 4-story mixed use project. It has about 100,000 square feet of office, 25 residential units with 4 affordable. And this was approved back in 2019, and this should be getting wrapped up very shortly. This is a Windy Hill project. You can see it, it's functionally done. They've just been putting the finishing touches on it. And this is right across the railroad tracks between 3rd and 4th. Then we have 500 East 3rd. This is also known as Block 21. This one hasn't broken ground yet. It was recently approved by the City Council this past summer. This is also a mixed use with about 180,000 square feet of office and 111 residential units, including 12 affordable units. And then this one this is where you can currently find Donut Delight. This is also kitty corner to the Caltrain station. We do have a project, this is still in the earlier stages, making its way through the approval process, a 4-story mixed use building with commercial on the ground floor and office above. And this project is within the downtown parking district, so it would not be providing any below grade parking on site. And then we have also making its way through the development process currently, a new project in the Draeger site. And the goal is that this project would retain the Draeger's grocery store and then build office space above it and have 10 residential units, all of which would be affordable at the upper level. And this one is anticipated to go to Planning Commission and City Council later this fall and into the winter. And then 435 East 3rd, this one was recently approved, and I know they're making their way through the building permit process right now. This is kind of just across the railroad tracks, close to a couple of the other projects that were already referenced. It's a 5-story mixed-use building with 34,000 square feet of office and 5 residential units. And then this is right across B Street from Draeger's. This is a public-private partnership because this does include the city-owned public parking lots kind of in the back corner. And so this would be a mixed-use project that includes office space along B Street and on 5th. And then at the in the back corner on 5th and Railroad, where the city-owned properties are, we are looking at a 100% affordable project with 60 affordable units. And this would include 1 level of underground parking. And so this project just completed its study session before the Planning Commission. And so the next step will be moving through the formal development review process. And we are working with the applicant to keep that moving forward. But this is another exciting one where we're able to turn a city surface parking lot into a new affordable units. And then just a few other downtown projects to note. We've got in various stages, we've got 477 9th Avenue. This includes about a little under 30,000 square feet of office and 120 residential units. 616 South B Street. This is a 6-story mixed-use project with commercial uses and 48 residential units. And then we have, this is the Aaron Brothers site. It's just getting ready to break ground. I know it's been sitting there for quite some time. It was entitled several years back. But we did issue the building permits and construction should be starting very shortly if it hasn't already. I haven't been by there in a bit. And so this will be a 3-story mixed use with retail uses and office space above. Oh, looks like I lost the full screen there. And then we have our a smaller project at 1 Hayward. This is a 4-story mixed use with 18 residential units and 5,000 square feet of office, more on the edge of downtown. So that does conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions or go into more detail on any there or anything else in the community development or planning realm within the city.
Hi, Zach. I have like 9 questions.
Who you want? Who you want?
So now you scared it out of me. You talked about maximizing public transportation hubs. What's the relationship to your plan and those agencies increasing their capacity to carry riders, whether it's bus or train or other kinds of to be determined? And the second question is, and I know you weren't addressing parks, but I'm thinking of all these people, many of them have families, what accommodations they're going to be to provide enough recreation space for the children of those families. I'll keep it to 2 questions.
Yeah, those are 2 good questions. And so, yeah, I mean, when you mentioned our transit agencies such as Caltrain, Samtrans, and other transit providers, they are separate independent agencies. Really, the key is coordination. And this is whether it's kind of making sure we're engaged. And I know our Public Works Department's been very engaged in communicating with Samtrans and Caltrain as the electrification process goes through. We just completed the grade separation project down along near the Hillsdale station and relocated and rebuilt the Hillsdale Caltrain station there. Similarly, we actually just approved a project with 191 residential units right next to the Hayward Park station. And so we do work closely with our transit agency partners, and they oftentimes the planning comes first, because they're going to adjust their routes based on demand. And so as we plan for new development or intensification of use in an area, we're sharing that with our transit agencies, and then they use that to guide their future transit plans. But the key is you can't have the transit routes there until you have the ridership to support it. So sometimes you need to get the projects done before then they update or adopt their routes or their schedules to accommodate those additional users. So there's always a balance, but the key is planning and coordination with those other partner agencies. And then your second question about parks and open space, we've been hearing a lot about that, and it's definitely a challenge because of, I mean, primarily of the cost of land, but then also, I mean, you have a lot of facility maintenance costs. But the key is, how do you increase your parks and recreation amenities to ensure that we have enough to support our population as it grows? And so that is really where we're exploring maybe where we better utilize spaces. I know, like, we just had Boral Park open up, so we identify areas where maybe they're more passive, where maybe we can get a new playground or park built in there to better serve the surrounding neighborhood. Also looking to our projects as they develop to include new parks and open space. And in those cases, that's that kind of public-private partnership where they build and maintain the park, but they ensure that it's open and available to the public, and the public is aware that that's an amenity. But yeah, that's a key quality of life component, is making sure that the parks and recreational amenities are getting more robust and expanded as we allow for this new development.
Just a comment, I was thinking of projects that include large land use, like soccer fields and baseball fields and those kinds of things for really active sports for the children.
There is, and that's actually one of the themes of the general plan is exploring greater facility sharing agreements with our schools, because really our schools have the biggest kind of consolidated areas when you're talking about sports fields, gymnasiums, pools. And so I think another opportunity is there ways where the city and the schools can partner together to maximize the use of those and open them up to maybe other users that aren't the school. So yeah, there's different ways, but it's a challenge. So it requires some creative and often outside the box thinking as to how we can meet those demands and make sure that those amenities are available.
Thanks, Zach.
Zach, what's the height limit now for San Mateo?
Right now, under Measure Y, which was most recently adopted back in 2020, the height limit in the city is 55 feet, and we have a maximum density of 50 units an acre.
But eight stories isn't 55 feet, so when will that change?
So that's the other piece of our general plan that we will need to have a robust discussion on about how to best move forward. Is right now the land use map that is recommended in moving forward with the general plan does include heights and densities that exceed the limits set by Measure Y. And so right now, Measure Y, if it's not renewed, would sunset in 2030. So I mean, one approach is you let it take its course, and the goal is that this is the new plan and that it isn't renewed. Or there could be a discussion about a modification that goes on the ballot after the general plan is adopted to come up with a path forward for how these could be adjusted. And those height ranges are more of a placeholder to think about. So those could change if there's a discussion and an agreement on a ballot measure that could move forward. So those will be discussions that will take place into next year about how to move forward. But in its current form, there will need to be some sort of ballot initiative or planning for how our general plan stays in alignment with Measure Y. But those discussions are TBD, so we don't have an answer yet as to how that'll move forward.
We are constantly hearing about the drought and safe water, also Flex Alert, don't use power between 4 and 9. Where's all the additional water and power that we can come to support all this development, not only in San Mateo, but up and down the peninsula?
Yeah, those are two excellent questions. We hear about that a lot. The water shortage, obviously, that's not getting any better. How do you basically get more units on a static or even reduced amount of water? And then similarly, as we're transitioning, we're going to have increased pressure on the grid. We're already seeing it in the form of EV chargers going into a lot more homes. New accessory dwelling units come on, which require additional meters and different additional load capacity. And so the key there is really working with PG&E to find ways, how do we support them in investing in and increasing the capacity of our utility infrastructure? And then concurrently with the building codes, how do we increase efficiency and conservation? So as these new units come online, per capita, they're using less electricity. And so those are all pieces that we don't have full answers to. So it takes, the general plan creates the umbrella, but then there's a lot more focused and detailed planning that's going to need to go in. Similarly with water, the city doesn't provide its own water. We, Cal Water, and then east of the lagoon, Estero, provide the city with water. And so we'll need to work closely with both of those agencies. And again, there's a component of conservation and efficiency. Already, we've noticed trends where new projects that come online significantly reduce per capita water usage, both in increased water efficiency with landscaping, just improved appliance fixtures and other things. But yeah, as you grow, inevitably that demand's going to increase. So how do you balance that with a challenge in limiting water supply? And so those are also details that as we develop our land use plan, then our water districts will need to update their water service plans. And so we'll need to work through some of those. And we could have certain policies that identify the need where we only go so far until we've identified new water sources, or we've coordinated with our water agencies to have updated water service plans that identify how we can move forward. So we don't necessarily have answers, but we want to put in place the pieces that ensure smart planning as we move forward.
This is a follow-up to John's question. So I know there's going to be a ban, I don't know the dates, on use of natural gas. That new construction, as I've heard, it cannot use natural gas for heating or cooking or any other auxiliary furnaces. Is that part of your plan? But along that line that connects with John, that increases the demand on the electric grid if you're getting rid of natural gas. And a third moment, I heard that the city is actually not going to grandfather in. The city council voted that current construction must accommodate all electric, or so, you know, whatever you want to call the alternative to natural gas. Can you speak to those 2 points?
So I don't have a super in-depth knowledge of that, and that actually will be an item that's discussed at our council meeting next Monday. So that's looking to be a very robust discussion there, and I think some of the answers might lie in that. But yeah, I think that the key there is working closely with Peninsula Clean Energy and PG&E to know that, and I believe the studies are there to show that with a number of measures, the combination of improved efficiency and then other sources coming online, that we can continue to support the load requirements as we make that transition. But yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that we still need to really study in depth to make sure we have good answers on, and make sure we're planning the steps ahead before we get there.
Zach, is there any talk about reuse water programs? Some cities are working on that. Is San Mateo working on that?
We are. The water treatment plant, which is currently under construction right now, will have the ability to produce reusable water for irrigation, non-potable purposes. And so we do have some policies in our general plan that speak to that. So once our updated treatment plant comes online, then we'll work with our water providers to see what kind of opportunities are available there to fold that into our water distribution infrastructure.
Zach, what's the current, I don't know, feeling of retaining the parklets in the downtown area? Because sometimes I see there's a parklet and then it's gone. Like on San Mateo Drive, there was one there right by the parking over crossing, and then now it's gone. So what's the current state of that?
So the city did transition from its kind of interim temporary parklet provisions to a permanent policy that kind of envisioned them being more long-term. When they first were rolled out during COVID, the idea was to provide immediate relief to allow our restaurants the ability to continue to operate. But the key was that was always envisioned as more of an interim temporary measure. And then once that was moving forward and we realized that there was definite public interest in maintaining this element downtown, they were well received. So then we moved forward and adopted permanent parklet provisions. And then we phased in a timeline for where businesses and restaurants needed to come into compliance. And so what you're seeing is kind of the last pieces of transition there, as not all restaurants decided they wanted to keep them because there were different requirements for establishing a permanent parklet provision, including we didn't allow for those permanent roof enclosures anymore. So some businesses and restaurants opted to just take theirs down because they didn't want to move forward with a permanent version of their parklet. So that's probably what you're seeing at this point. I believe almost all of our parklets are now permitted and meet our current kind of longer term standards. But even within that, as businesses come and go, they might then see a need to take down their parklets, or maybe they've decided they're not worth maintaining. And we do have requirements if they're not being actively maintained that they do need to be removed so that they don't become blighted.
So what is the rent they're charging now on a parklet? How is that arrangement set up?
To be honest, I don't know the exact number. I think I saw it a little ways back, but I didn't retain that individual number. I think the goal was finding a balance with meeting, providing some degree of cost recovery for the city, but not making them too cost prohibitive for businesses and residents. But I unfortunately I don't know that exact number.
You were keeping some of the restaurants going by doing that, and everybody likes it. I just wondered if you can still, the city can absorb part of the cost of the loss of parking meters.
I know that's been an ongoing study, and I think we looked at the idea that given the public interest, that was a public amenity that was desired downtown, but I don't know the specifics of how we're accommodating that or if we've offset it in any way or how that's been balanced.
Is B Street going to continue to be closed?
B Street between 1st and 3rd, yes, that is now moving forward with permanent improvements, and the goal is that will be a pedestrian mall for the foreseeable future. And we are moving forward. We're kind of doing some shorter term plans to transition it into more of a pedestrian realm, and then we are developing longer term plans when budget is available to kind of redo the surface and provide other more permanent built amenities to kind of create that full pedestrian mall experience.
We have run out of time.
Well,
we can ask questions for 2 hours. Leanne, go ahead.
I just wanted to throw a very sensitive question out there. I know you talked about low income. What about accommodations for the housing insecure, the homeless? They don't meet any kind of income requirements. Sometimes they have next to nothing. Are there any accommodations for that population?
There's a variety of policies in our housing element to look to help support that population and get them into more permanent housing. And often what we find, especially with those that are, say, living in RVs, and you've probably heard about the issue up and down the peninsula, is they actually do have jobs and they do have an income, but they just, it's not enough to be able to afford housing or rents in this area. And so, yeah, within our very low income category, there's also an extremely low income category, and that's basically 0 to 30%. So yeah, the affordable housing ideally, and the key challenge is that the resources to build housing is significant. So there's a lot more demand than there is supply, but we're working on different ways that we can help reduce that gap. But yeah, there are specific policies that are targeted to how we can help support those that are homeless or living out of their cars and get them into more permanent supportive housing.
And as Jim said, we're out of time. I want to thank you on behalf of the club for taking time with us today and providing a lot of extremely thoughtful information. I don't live in San Mateo, but what happens in San Mateo affects the rest of the peninsula as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me this morning.
Sorry you couldn't have breakfast with us.
Maybe next time.
Can we deliver a burrito to you?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Have a nice day.
Okay, so that brings us, we've already mentioned